to do this without being super skilled. Oh, there, I see it on Twitter.
All right.
Oh shit.
We
Cool.
are live. Well, I totally have to change that name. Hey, delete the tweet that came from your account.
From Trustless State?
Yeah, and just retweet the one from POV.
Okay. Not sure if we have any listeners right now, but just go ahead and get comfortable while we figure this out. Sorry. Pop the popcorn. Okay. Do you see it on YouTube?
Yeah, I think it's all up.
Okay. Pop the popcorn. Oh, Anthony's in here. What up? How do I make that not play? Okay. Okay, we got 9 people in here. Who are they?
All right, should we just get started?
How do I snoop? How do I snoop on them? I want it to tell me who they are. It's 11 now.
Holler in the chat box, yo.
Yeah.
You guys, this is the 100th episode of POV Crypto. Been talking to David for a long ass time now.
Long ass time. It'll be funny. One day we might actually have talked to each other more on Zoom than we have in real life. 100 episodes. That's at least 150 hours. How do I check who's in here? I want to see who loves us.
They need a comment.
Yeah.
But let's just get started.
Okay.
My buddy Bill's telling me to get our shit together.
Yeah, I know. Well, this is kind of, as we were saying earlier, this is kind of a bold thing to do, but flying by the seat of your pants for a 100th episode that we advertised.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. So the topic I wanted to talk about today, also thank you everyone for coming in and hanging out with us. This is going to be a ton of fun. I'm really excited to kick off the whole POV starts live streaming thing. I think it's a really good format for us. There should be a lot of synergy with just how we produce content and it being a live streamed thing. So I'm monitoring the chat. So Christian probably is too. So if you type stuff, we will read it. Just granted, there is like a 15-second delay. So the conversation will probably have moved on by at least 15 seconds. So just know that. But again, thank you everyone for joining us. Christian, do you want to say anything before we get the episode started?
Thanks for listening to my voice for 100 episodes. For those of you who've been in since day one, appreciate y'all. It's exciting to get up and running with this podcast.
Absolutely. Okay, so one of the topics I wanted to talk about today is minimal viable decentralization. Is there anything else you want to talk about, Christian?
No, I think we can talk about that, and then hopefully we can throw some Zoom links out to a couple of our former guests and friends in the space and get their take. But okay. Why don't you introduce this idea? Should we introduce the show? Like, are we going to start this off as like a regular show?
I guess so. But before we do that, we don't want to read our ads, do we?
No, we don't.
Okay. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you should hop over to Periscope. Because that's where we want everyone to be. So if you're also watching this on Periscope, but not on the POV Crypto Periscope, also hop into the POV Crypto Periscope.
We're making this too hard.
Yeah. So there's like 5 different places to watch it. POV's account, Christian's account, my account, and our YouTube account. If everyone can go to the POV Periscope so we can all hang out in the same room, that would be great. Hey, thanks for the congratulations, Nick. Okay.
Sweet.
So
we got some boys in here.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. So we don't want to read our ads. So let's just skip that. Okay. So everyone, welcome to POV Crypto. Minimal viable decentralization is it was an article I read a while ago that came before. It talked about stuff before the whole crypto revolution, and it was an article written about and during the crypto revolution, but about stuff before that, and talked about how decentralization is just a means to an end to achieve a goal, and if you decentralize more than what you need to, then things don't go so well. And so it brought up a couple examples, which I'm not prepared to talk about because I didn't memorize the article, but it talked about a couple of examples of things that people would do with technology that governments or some entity wouldn't be a fan of. And because they were centralized, that entity would come and stop them. And there are all these options that people can take to keep going with what they want to do. And all of them are on the decentralization spectrum. But what the article contests is that you should never go more decentralized than what you need to be in order to achieve your goal, because any further decentralization is just going to kill user experience. And it brought up a number of examples that had two possible paths that this technology could go, and users always ended up using the minimally viable decentralized product because of its optimum user experience. So that's kind of the topic I wanted to bring up today. Any thoughts on that so far, Christian?
I recently read a tweet and I forgot who said it, but it was like minimal viable decentralization is a scam. So
of course it's a scam, huge scam.
So
scamming everyone out of all of their money.
I don't actually 100% agree with that. I do think that there is.
You don't 100% agree that it's a scam?
Well, I think it just depends on the. No, I'm not calling it a scam. I was just trying to come into guns blazing. This idea of like how much decentralization is needed to create censorship resistance and in a robust system like that. That's kind of an interesting idea. I would say that when it comes like that question is really important depending on like what's the context, right? Like, are we talking about money? Are we talking about a social media platform? Like, what are we talking about? I would say that when it comes to like a crypto money, I don't know if there is a minimal viable decentralization. I think it's either a decentralized network that is getting more decentralized and has a lot of stakeholders, or it's a centralized one and there are attack vectors. But when it's something else, like I totally think that like maybe like a banking or some sort of exchange infrastructure, like it doesn't have to be 100% centralized. It could be, or decentralized. It could be some sort of like a, what's Liquid? Liquid is, there's like a committee of like 10 different people, right? So it's all like split up, right? It's a federation. Exactly. So like, there's like papers talking about like how strong a federation can be and stuff like that. So I definitely think that there's definitely a scale, and what is necessary for certain things is not 100% decentralization. But when it comes to money, you probably want that to be 100%, like very, very, it's decentralized as possible on many spectrums.
Yeah. So what you're saying is like, so there's two polarities here, and this is what the article was talking about. I think it was initially a music streaming service, kind of like an early Pirate Bay, early Napster kind of thing. And that makes sense to be minimal viable decentralized, minimally viable, whatever. And that's because like the costs of becoming more decentralized just hinder the product. But you're saying that that's true for perhaps all things except for money, when money might be that this one thing where this rule doesn't apply, where minimal viable decentralization doesn't apply. And we should ask, do you think that like the thing that is maximally decentralized becomes the money, or that the money should or ought to be maximally decentralized? Like, is there an order of operations here?
Well, I guess like if you are going to design like a uncorruptible money network, then you would probably want to design it to just get more decentralized over time. It's kind of like, what's the right inflation rate? Also, like, what's the right decentralization level to be uncorruptible, if that's what your goal is, right? If like personally, like when they talk about UX, like I think like, yeah, okay, of course, using Bitcoin on chain is going to have some like difficult UX hurdles, but at the same time, like I don't expect most people to use Bitcoin on chain, so I'm not even really thinking about how do you make on chain the best experience possible. I'm assuming that in the future, there's gonna be more centralized levels above on chain Bitcoin that most people will be interacting with. On the flip side, though, like what the maximally decentralized base layer does is it makes a corruptible unit that can be referenced anywhere, right? You can reference it on a completely centralized app. You can reference it on a Urbit network that is, everyone's hosting their own personal computer and everyone holds their own data. Like, who knows? Like, it all does is it proves the unit exists and it's uncorruptible. So like, I don't know, like
The unit
if you're trying to create some other sort of system, I don't know what is the necessary decentralization that needs to be there. And I would say that's a criticism towards Ethereum and dApps. Like maybe a lot of these dApps, of course, they're like fighting all these hurdles because they're trying to decentralize something that doesn't even necessarily need to be decentralized to be censorship resistant per se.
Yeah, and this is what I've thought a lot about recently, and we mentioned this the last live stream we did, is all of these dApps on top of Ethereum. First off, the name dApp is bad, so we should move on from that. And
probably not going to.
Yeah, probably not. But I'm of the opinion it doesn't really matter. Names are names, and things are things other than names. But like, so all these dApps on top of Ethereum, all these applications, we've all been super obsessed with decentralizing them, because that's what this whole industry is obsessed with. It's obsessed with the word decentralized, and it thinks that like decentralization equal good, and decentralized is our holy Jesus, and decentralized. Like, is it decentralized? And we've had this fascination with like, okay, so these teams build this product, and then the next question that they are asked is like, okay, so how are you going to decentralize it? When it's like not an appropriate question to ask. Like you shouldn't be assuming that all teams at all places want to decentralize the product. Like that's in my original, when me and Remy, my boss, were talking about realty, like we were talking about like, okay, how do we decentralize this ultimately? Like at the end game of realty, like how do we turn this into a decentralized application? And we thought for about 5 minutes and then decided that would be a dumb goal that we should not do. And it would just it would totally be a huge distraction. And even if we could, like, do we even want to? And so talking about these applications that are kind of more in the gray area, like applications like Compound or DYDX or Dharma, like all these like pseudo decentralized, but again, we shouldn't even be using the word decentralized. They're just kind of these like apps. They're just these applications. And the question of whether they are or are not decentralized, I think we should stop asking. Like what we should really be asking, like for Compound, is like what we should really be asking is there a backdoor? And there is. But that's because of these reasons that Compound wants to give, because they want the upgradability, et cetera, et cetera. And they want this control over the system. And so like we've all been assuming that Compound is going to be turned into Uniswap, and Uniswap is actually correctly decentralized to the same degree that Ethereum is, because it's just this like protocol, it's just this application. And Compound, we don't know what the Compound team's goals for Compound are. At least I don't. Do they want themselves to become protocolized like Uniswap, or do they want themselves to become just like an on-chain service like, I don't know, Realty?
So I guess to respond to that, I think what I'm trying to understand from you is like, you're talking more specifically about Ethereum dApps, right? And trying to specify, what question should we be talking about when we're evaluating these things? And is the governance of how it is updated or managed, does that even matter, right? And I've seen someone like tweeting about like, it should be about, is it stoppable or is it unstoppable, more than is it decentralized? So I don't know. I'm not surprised that these are kind of questions that people like yourself and others in the ETH community are kind of going after. And I mean, part of it is because a lot of dApps have like this weird conflict where they're actually not decentralized, and they're actually very centralized, and they have these backdoors and they're very stoppable. I would say that, if you're trying to do something that you would consider the US would want you to do with KYC, then you need to have it set up in a manner where it is unstoppable and you can't, and there is no backdoor, right? Whether it needs to be decentralized in order to achieve that, that's a question that I think it depends on. Like, is this piece of code going to be something that's constantly developed? If it is, maybe it doesn't even have to be decentralized. Maybe actually they just have to be anonymous or trying to evade, whoever's updating it just has to try to be evading whoever's going to be trying to do the censoring. So yeah, I mean, I can totally see like why maybe like the heuristic of decentralization isn't necessarily the right one when it comes to evaluating these apps. And honestly, again, like, not to make it about Bitcoin, but that's why I think the Bitcoin community is pretty damn honest about the apps that we're building. And they are very realistic about like, what is the goal here? And, how do we make sure we don't get arrested and try to achieve this thing? Hey, BTC Pay Server has a foundation and it has known contributors. It also has, unknown contributors, but it's by no means, they're developing software that's open source. People can download it. It's, theoretically, it is unstoppable to operate your own BTC Pay Server. But the organization itself is by no means, decentralized or has decentralized governance or anything like that. And they're operating in a way and they're marketing it in a way where they're trying, not to be culpable to some degree. We'll see how heavy the law gets with people that facilitate, payment services outside of law, but
right.
We'll see.
Yeah. Like, I'm always more, I'm more risk taking than pretty much all the Bitcoiners that you bring on, and including yourself. Like, I just don't think that people are going to be coming after a team of people that wrote a payment merchant plugin for websites for Bitcoin. Like, I just don't see that being an issue. Like, the Bitcoiners are just so paranoid that the custodians of the US dollar are going to come and start, doing some whack-a-mole with all these Bitcoin infrastructure builders. And I just don't see that. I don't see that happening. But it would be really interesting if something like that did happen, especially for the Ethereum ecosystem, because like, imagine if like Robert Lesher, the CEO of Compound, got like a subpoena or something, or got thrown in jail like Virgil did for unrelated reasons. And then there would be this big, like, long drawn out court case that would really define a lot. Like, it would define, because like Robert Lesher, and sorry, Robert, to put you on the spot and use you as an example here, but like, the Compound team would have to present like this argument about like, okay, so we're not actually facilitating like borrowing and lending platforms or whatever regulation is involved with that. We just wrote the contract. Like, we just wrote the code and put it on Ethereum. And so we're not facilitating anything. We just built this thing that helps facilitate it. And so like, no, like, the Compound team doesn't have any money. Sorry, one sec. The Compound team doesn't have any money. Like, they don't have any, they're not doing any transactions. And so they have like this deniability saying like, hey, like, we didn't actually do anything. We're not brokers. We're not money transmitters. We just like wrote the code, and then everyone else just started using it. And so that would be a pretty interesting question. You're muted.
It was interesting talking to Kane from Synthetics too, because he was kind of saying something very similar about that, there are no trades actually being made. It's just converting one synthetic collateral to another based on price feeds. So
it's like
I'm
a loophole,
sure,
right?
like, I'm sure there are plenty of lawyers that are on this, but at the same time, if you are enabling, a sanctioned country to do something and you can be identified and you could have, everything thrown at you as well. Like that's not out of the question. We've seen it with Ross Ulbricht, where this virtual thing is a developing story. Ultimately, I think Brandon said this inside the chat, like we are trying to take power away from the state, printing power, sanctioning power, that kind of stuff. Like that inherently gets removed because of this technology. I don't think that it's going to be, fun and dandy, especially when there's reasons for them to come after certain folks. I think we should get some people on this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to send a link to Brandon.
Okay. All right. We're bringing people in.
Yeah. Let's get some people's takes. Looks like we have I Decentralized is in there too.
Yeah.
What's
Anthony.
up, Nick?
The Ross Ulbricht case is interesting because it's like exactly what I don't want to have as an example as in Ethereum. Like now we have all these networks and applications and stuff like that. And there's this guy named Ross Ulbricht who's in jail for life for doing something like this. But at the same time,
Double
like we
life
have
plus 40.
Yeah, right. Rest in peace. Well, whatever the appropriate thing to say is for that. But like at the same time, that it hasn't happened since. Like it was like the one he was made an example of, and now that hasn't been replicated for 5 years.
Who knows, man? What's up, Brandon?
What up, Brandon? Yeah, he's figuring it out. This is going to be a fun little.
All right, continue talking about Ross.
Well, yeah, I mean, so like I guess there is precedent for Bitcoiners to be like super paranoid. Because no one wants to be in jail for 2 life sentences plus 40, because that would suck. But at the same time, like this just only happened once. Like, has this happened again since, or anything like remotely similar to it? Whatever.
I'm sure there's untold stories. I remember
so?
There's a much sketchier guy who was in trouble a couple of years back. Brandon, what's your take?
Hey guys, sorry, figuring out some technical issues. Can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Minimal viable decentralization. What does it mean? Like, how paranoid should people be?
All right, here we go. So I think first of all, we have to realize, and most people on the phone already do, but decentralization is expensive and it's always going to be less efficient. It's always going to be more expensive to decentralize things, right? And also, decentralization is not the goal. That doesn't get you anything in and of itself. Decentralization is just a tool that Satoshi found out he could leverage to do the most important thing in the whole space, which is prevent money production from being co-opted. That's the hardest thing to solve here. That's the 5,000 year, the 10,000 year problem that was solved with Bitcoin. And so then with decentralization and with the ethics of money production being sound, to steal the title of a book I like, then you create a monetary system that can't be corrupted. That's where you get the censorship resistance, the unstoppable, global, borderless. Insert Andreas's line right there. And so if we look at it from that angle, that's the fundamental problem. And maybe we can ask the question, is anything else important enough to decentralize? Right? Like, do we need decentralized video game avatars? I get the argument, right? It's a logical argument, but is it really going to be the way we go when there's always going to be a more efficient path? So that's kind of where my question is like, is anything important enough besides money? I would say maybe decentralized identity could be as important. Or some sort of a pseudonymous system to allow us free speech, or like selectively choose a identity for a thing that we need to do that's important, and then come back into our normal public profile. That's sort of my thought there.
Yeah. So this is like one of the reasons why Ethereum could be so interesting, is because you can write this application on top of Ethereum, you can ride in Ethereum's wake of being decentralized. You can get whatever decentralization that Ethereum has at no further costs. So it doesn't cost Ethereum. It doesn't, because like Uniswap is on Ethereum, it doesn't make Ethereum more expensive or less expensive to have that degree of decentralization. And so like where Bitcoin can take the power of printing money away from anyone and give it to everyone or no one. Like Ethereum does that same thing with whatever else justifiably wants to be decentralized or not.
Right. My concern there is the ability that Ethereum has, the expressive language, the ability to do everything on the base layer, that requires trading off some of the important things that we're talking about. Necessarily, security goes down when you do that. And it's yet to be seen if the minimum viable security that Ethereum is seeking through its issuance, whatever, the architecture that's going to be coming out of that, is that going to be secure enough? That's yet to be seen. Let's say it is. That's a different conversation. I certainly don't believe that we should be optimizing for that now. I think it's far more important that we have a rock solid base layer that can't be fucked with. And then we get as far as we can on other layers. And I see that path happening significantly slower than how Ethereum wants it to go. But I think that's the right path. It's the long-term path. It's the way biology grows.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for the take, Brandon.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, we're gonna kick you off. There's more people that want to come on, but
awesome.
Thanks for the opinion.
Guys.
Yeah, this is fun.
Peace.
All right, should we get an Ethereum on here?
Yeah, Anthony, I sent him the link, but I told him to wait. Anyone else that you prefer?
Yeah, no, Anthony, if you have that link, go ahead and click that, bro. Sure, you want to ping him again?
Yeah, I think
this is fun. This is fun. We're hosting an octagon.
Crowdsourcing these POVs.
Yeah,
what do you think of that opinion?
Yeah, the idea of like Bitcoin having this rock solid base and then growing further up the accessibility or whatever decentralization. It's just one of many questions that we just won't know until we have hindsight. Like I don't think anyone will be able to answer it ahead of time. What up, Anthony? Welcome to POV Crypto. You're muted. Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Goodbye.
No, I think he's trying to figure out his sound.
Yeah,
I think Anthony's in Thailand, so he's definitely in the Thailand uniform, tank top, sweating.
90 degrees and high humidity.
Yeah, that was me 2 years ago. Yeah, if y'all haven't been to Thailand, highly recommend it. So, how do you think people should think about dApps if necessarily like just optimizing for decentralization isn't the right framework?
Yeah.
Or we could get Anthony.
Or we can get Anthony's opinion. It's hard to know what they've been listening to and what they haven't been listening to. What up, Anthony? Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on minimal viable decentralization?
Yeah, so long story short, I think that the ethos of both communities is pretty similar. I think we want to have a secure base layer, and then moving forward after that is where we really differ. You know, Bitcoin, obviously, because of the scripting language, it's not as lush. You can't do smart contracts and Turing complete language, all that to keep it simple. And I think that where it comes to Ethereum, and you'll understand it more in an article I release later, is that I look at Ethereum now not so much as just a technology. It's actually a live organism. And it's so decentralized that I compare it to like a Hydra. If you have one thing that gets slashed off, say Ether Delta in 2017, you have something else that's going to pop up, right? Maybe two things, maybe three things. And so we saw Ether Delta get slashed off because it was not decentralized. It was not censorship resistant. The SEC came and slapped the heads, cut it off, and now it's gone. But then because the community is alive, because it's a lush organism, we have things like Uniswap popping up and now tons of other decentralized applications. And so now to look at, say, Compound or to look at DYDX, anything like that, if we look at that as not censorship resistant, as stoppable, then let it be cut off, let it die. Because Ethereum is going to continue to regenerate. New communities will pop up within Ethereum, and it might be anonymous next time. Someone else might fork the code and deploy it anonymously, but it's going to continue to come back. It's not going to stop. And I'm all for KYC, I'm all for AML and being compliant. But at the end of the day, we will have, mark my words, a secure global base layer where all these other small blockchains will report into for finality. And that's going to be Ethereum. And I'd love to hear, people argue that, but that's what's going to happen. It's going to continue. It's alive. The organism's unstoppable now.
Yeah. So the KYC side of Ethereum, I've been thinking about a little bit more and more lately. And Matt Odell brought up on our podcast forever ago that he thinks that Ethereum is just going to be the KYC chain, which I think it will be. And it will also be a non-KYC chain. So like if you take, for example, Stranger Things, like has the upside down, there's just going to be two sides of Ethereum. There's going to be this KYC side of Ethereum, and there's going to be the non-KYC side of Ethereum. And so like if people like Bitcoiners will say like at some point MakerDAO is going to have to bend the knee to the state and enforce KYC, and maybe they do, but then somebody's just going to fork MakerDAO and make no KYC DAO. And it's just going to be the same thing. And then we're going to have two DAIs, and they're both going to be stable because they're both going to have the same processes. But one's going to have the KYC side and one's going to have the non-KYC side. And there's no one stopping. Like you can say that's true for any application that is forced to bend the knee to the state is like, well, then you can just fork it and just have the non-KYC version of it. And so the whole idea that and then maybe the US based teams get in trouble, but like Ethereum's fine. Ethereum's a Hydra. You can cut off its MakerDAO and still have MakerDAO.
And who said that? Like, where are you pulling that information from? Because I hadn't read that, but that's awesome that it's going to have the upside down and KYC versus, open finance, so to speak.
Oh, Matt Odell was the guy who thinks that every application on Ethereum will be KYC. And I think we're going to bring him on maybe after you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he thinks everything will be KYC'd, where you're saying is there will be KYC, but then we'll have the upside down as well.
Yeah, like Realty, for example, we're our tokens are KYC tokens, and so we have our tokens inside of Uniswap, and that whatever accessing that particular exchange on Uniswap requires KYC, but it doesn't require KYC for DAI to Ether or MKR to Ether or whatever.
Yeah. So when USA?
It's not up to us. It's up to the SEC.
All right, CK, you got anything?
Since
you got me, bro. I wanted to link up, but I'm still in Thailand, so we gotta make another appointment, bro.
You're muted. Christian, you're muted.
Sorry, I thought I wasn't muted. I was trying to talk to you. It's funny that you know, I know you're working on this Ethereum as a Hydra. It's funny that you came up right after Brandon.
Yeah, that is
really
funny.
Made it, Bitcoin is a decentralized organism analogy like a year and a half ago, talking about how it compares to like mycelium. Generally, when I refer to things as Hydra, I talk about the entire altcoin ecosystem as the Hydra of shit. It creates a ton of confusion. It's this massive like smorgasbord of, less secure block space and, just block space that you can kind of mess around with. And ultimately, it's a nice complement to Bitcoin. I definitely think that Ethereum is like the king of that area. And I totally see how like ETH, I do see the example. Like I do think that Ethereum is mildly censorship resistant and is of course very, and when I say mildly, I'm saying like if someone wants to come down on Ethereum leadership, that there is resistance, like there will be redundancies and resistance. But I think that like ultimately my biggest problem with Ethereum is the fact that y'all still are trying to coordinate future moves and building new networks and killing your old network. Like you're literally conspiring right now while building E2 is in murdering your old network. Like that's kind of part of it. You're trying to kill your decentralized organism as you're building this new thing.
We're going to fold it in.
I honestly think that we'll see, but like, Eric Connor like posted about how he found this difficulty bomb situation and you guys got to fix it. Like you guys are building in all these little booby traps into your thing, right? Because you always have a new thing to make. Yeah. Like the ETH community is the biggest danger to the decentralized organism that you're describing. And whereas the Bitcoin community on the flip side is not fucking with it. It's just like, we're just keeping the train going.
In this window of time that we have before the big stakeholders of the world financial system realizes what Ethereum is, like we want to do that as much as possible. When it actually does become a threat, and maybe when there is some sort of coalition of states to take down Ethereum, which will never fucking happen. Well, we're going to take as much luxury as we can to do
KYC first.
Yeah, sure. KYC first.
And so in regards to the hydra of shit, so I think the altcoin space, it's unfortunate that it gets bunched together because there actually is a lot of promising tech out there. And because we had our big speculative bubble, which we're going to have more, there is a lot of trash out there. But why I don't agree with the point of altcoins are side chains for Bitcoin is that you guys don't have any atomic swaps yet. And if there's no atomic swaps, then you're putting all your precious Bitcoin or whatever into the hands of, custody solutions. And so, that's just that alone, the decentralized exchange without them taking custody. If that was the only value proposition of Ethereum, it's still a huge one. Like that's big. If anyone doesn't agree that having a proper DEX is valuable, then they're just ignoring innovation blindly. And there's a lot of other things, as you guys have seen, and there's more use cases to come that people don't even know about because it's an organism. And so, I understand what you're going to say. And let's say Ethereum dies and crashes and, oh my gosh, the base layer is gone. We still got Bitcoin, right, guys? And I guess we'll continue on the slow trek of using federated side chains, and maybe that'll work, but I don't see that happening, man. Yeah. I don't see that happening.
There's a thing called Lightning, but thanks for the 2 cents.
Cue the chart, the Lightning locked up value chart. But anyway, appreciate
Lightning
it, guys.
isn't a blockchain, but apparently that's difficult to understand. Thanks for hopping on. Appreciate the time. I think we have Ansel coming on next.
Oh boy, this is
I'm sure Ansel has opinions on this. I'm trying to track down Matt. So Ansel, if you're listening, you should hop on.
All right, thanks, Anthony.
All right, guys, I appreciate you. Good job. I've been listening to you since the beginning, and it's inspiring that even in the crowded podcast space, you guys swooped into the scene with a unique philosophy, since you guys are so different, and it really is getting everyone out of their echo chamber. So hopefully 2020 is not less fighting, and people pay attention to you guys because it's good to have different ears in your ear. All right, cheers.
Appreciate the kind words, sir. Thank you.
100%. Thank you.
Since in the moment that we take to get our next guest on here, this is the last day of November. As soon as I hit end meeting, I'm rushing off to the bathroom and shaving this goddamn beard. But it's also the last day to donate to either the Bitcoin side or the Ethereum side. Christian, do you know how much Bitcoin funds you guys we have on the Bitcoin side?
Yeah, actually, I just got a donation earlier today as well.
Oh yeah. Hold on, I'm pulling up the Ethereum funds.
Yeah.
Okay, what the fuck?
You got a big donation?
Yeah, we got 5 Ether 2 days ago. I didn't even look.
Jesus, that's fucking crazy.
We're at $1,250.
That's a pretty big donation.
Yeah.
Wow.
Who did that?
350 over here.
Who did that? If you're in chat, who did that? That's great. Well,
stay anon. I guess I'm donating to Gitcoin.
Yeah.
But that's going to be a huge pot for November. So this was $1,500. Wow. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, damn. We almost raised $2,000 with that collectively.
Jesus.
Thank you. Address.
Thank you, Whale.
0xe937, etc. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. That was great. Wow, honored. So all you Bitcoiners, if you guys want to donate, how much are you behind me by? Like $600? Collectively $600. You can put Christian back on top, but it's got to be done by the end of this end of the live stream.
Damn, dude.
Where's Ansel at?
I forgot to send him the link. One sec.
Oh, nice.
One sec.
Matt Odell's in the chat.
Yeah, I'll ping that too. One sec. Damn, that's a very generous donation.
Yeah, you are in the hole, sir.
Where's Odell?
Okay. 21 people in chat. Mariano's in chat. Anti-Pro in chat. Anti, you want to come on? You want to come on after Ansel?
He's not going to do it.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, he just won't turn on his camera. What up, Ansel?
Ansel, what's up, man?
Figuring out the audio.
Hey,
you got the backdrop.
Yep.
PTC and markets. Let's go.
What's up, guys? Can you hear me?
What up?
Yeah, we can.
Yep.
Thanks for having me
Ansel,
on. This is awesome.
Yeah, of course, man. Continuing on the topic of minimal viable decentralization. I'm sure you got some opinions.
Yeah, I think it changes. Like a very, very small network with a market cap of $5 million, it doesn't need any decentralization. But as you get up there to 100 billion, $1 trillion market cap, then you're going to need a lot more decentralization. So, and we see that, as in some attacks that have happened around the space, the smallest exchanges might not get attacked, but once they get bigger, then they're more of a honeypot for people to attack. And even on Ethereum with the DAO, right, as it got higher and higher with a honeypot for the hacker, then it was hacked. So I think it's definitely a different spectrum depending on how big the network is.
Well, so Ethereum with the DAO hack, Ethereum wasn't hacked, just the DAO.
Well, it was hacked when they forked it to have the
Is that a hack?
Regular state.
Is that a hack?
Absolutely.
Well, they coordinated.
Well, yeah. It's a Byzantine attack. They coordinated to change the state, to have an irregular state transition. That's the definition of a Byzantine attack. And the Ethereum network was Byzantine attack to fork it.
Who was attacked in that scenario?
The consensus, the normal.
But what if the consensus was to attack?
It wasn't, because so a Byzantine attack, is to attack from one state to the next state, and that was made irregular. And so, by definition, in my opinion,
by your definition.
Well, I mean, by the definition of a Byzantine attack, I haven't heard anybody talk about it like that, but the social consensus stuff from outside of these networks, I mean, that's exactly what it is about. These Byzantine attacks trying to stop people from reaching consensus on the existing rules. And that's what happened. Yeah.
But then everyone kind of went along with it, except for a small, using it in an attack in that way doesn't accurately reflect the reality of the situation, how there was general consensus to do this and to move on. And that's why Ethereum is $150 and why Ethereum Classic is $7 or something.
Well, how do you know there's general consensus? I mean, there was a vote.
The market decided.
Well, there was a vote pre the fork with 4% of the tokens voting, right? Or something like that. And the new client updates defaulted to follow the fork. And so all of these people, they might not even know what's going on. And they even colluded with the exchanges to say, there's not going to be any chain split. It's going to follow our reference client. So that's what happened.
Yeah. I just don't really see it as that adversarial.
Okay, I don't want to stick into the past. Let's talk about Ethereum right now.
Yeah.
So there's kind of two levels, right? Is Ethereum as a base blockchain, is it decentralized enough, you think, to scave off any sort of real attack from a government? And then on top of that, these DeFi apps being built on top of it, are there do they actually have to be decentralized? And what should be the goal there?
Well, I think Ethereum is decentralized enough for a $20 billion market cap. And I don't really see it going much higher. So I think that it is going to remain decentralized enough, because there's not going to be as big of a honeypot for somebody to come in. I mean, why do they need to attack it if they're just going to do proof of stake, or, they're going to slowly grind down and mess up their own network? There's probably not going to be as much incentive to attack it. But the dApps, I mean, they're all centralized. I don't really consider them decentralized at all because of
Are you familiar with Uniswap?
I'm not familiar with the exact workings of it, but if it has an oracle, it's centralized.
It is an oracle.
Well, if it's taking stuff from outside the network to putting it inside the network, then okay, well, what's the big deal about it then?
It's a decentralized exchange. It's super cool. I can go from ETH to DAI, and then from DAI to MKR, and MKR to ETH without any intermediaries. In theoretically in one transaction, but right now I wouldn't be able to figure out how to do that. It would be like 3 transactions. And so like that's kind of like the beginnings of this conversation, right? And so like we have the capacity to build these applications on top of Ethereum, and they either have the capacity to be totally autonomous protocols like Uniswap, or centralized businesses like my company, Realty, where we do tokenized real estate. Like that, like we do KYC, we can revoke tokens, et cetera, et cetera. But we have no plans to be decentralized. And so like the whole idea behind like minimal viable decentralization is the idea that the least decentralized that you can be and still achieve your goal might be the right way to go. And any further decentralization is actually a hindrance, not a help to your product.
Well, yeah, but it depends on how valuable it is to attack, right? Decentralization is not an end in itself, like Brendan was saying. Mm-hmm. Decentralization is only there to make it robust and Byzantine fault tolerant. So, yeah, I mean, right now it's probably decentralized enough. And if there's a reason for decentralization in something like Uniswap, then I mean, it will have to get tested in real life against attackers. So, yeah, I don't think there really is, because there's so many. I mean, I don't see anything unique about you're using a decentralized exchange to exchange centralized tokens. So, I mean, it doesn't really follow or make sense.
Well, no. So again, my company Realty, we have our centralized tokens inside of Uniswap, and that allows people to go in and out of real estate positions like that. That's a benefit to our users. And so like there's a total world of decentralized finance applications like Uniswap, protocols, whatever, and its integration into real world companies. So the real world companies can like leverage the power of these applications.
And if you got subpoenaed or you got a cease and desist or something for one of your tokens, what happens if someone bought it on Uniswap? You could still freeze it or, mess with it. Yeah, right.
Maybe. I mean, it probably would get commingled with other tokens. And so that would be like interesting. Like we don't like if somebody's bought it on Uniswap and regulators didn't like that and they had a pool of other tokens, and then maybe they sent them to somebody else on the whitelist, then all that stuff gets pretty hairy.
But you could figure it out, right?
No,
I mean, if it was
not if it gets commingled.
Well, if it was a choice between figuring it out or going to prison, you might figure it out.
Well, it might just be impossible. It's like, well, once the funds are commingled, then they're commingled.
Then you turn off the contract and stop paying them out and reissue new tokens. So I mean, look, Uniswap could be this like order matching thing, and Ethereum could still very much be a KYC chain, and that is if every single thing worth exchanging is KYC'd, then it is a KYC chain, regardless if Uniswap itself necessarily has to have KYC. I would like to bring up the fact that at least with Uniswap, if people are going to coordinate around a new contract, like there's always some sort of a risk there, and ultimately liquidity is what matters, right? So if the conspirators move all the liquidity elsewhere and that new contract has issues with it, then what good is the other contract?
Well, I also think that there's a middleman issue, right? Like middlemen aren't bad necessarily. I think a lot of times Ethereum tries to take the middleman out of there when it's not necessary. So I mean, middlemen in most industries get paid well for their expertise, and it's only in the creation of the money that where the middleman is not valuable.
Well, so yeah, the middlemen aren't bad because they provide a service, but when that same service could be provided by a cheaper middleman, then everyone's going to go to that cheaper middleman because this is just how business works. But what Ethereum does is it makes that middleman just hyper cheap. And so we're not trying to kill middlemen. We're just trying to make middlemen in these applications.
I don't know if it's hyper cheap.
Hyper cheap and
cost of gas.
Much more risky, right? I mean, what happens?
No, I mean, I haven't had a problem with it. I think you just think it's risky.
I mean, look at the price of all these tokens. I mean, it's risky just to hold the tokens, let alone use
It's risky to hold Bitcoin. Like price goes up, price goes down. You can't explain that. Like the price of these things are not correlated with the value of the network or the project or whatever. Like this is just pure speculation at this point.
What else you guys?
Ansel, yeah, no, here I want to turn it away from necessarily Ethereum per se, but like in the matter of creating monetary networks and systems, like what do you think is the necessary amount of paranoia when developing these systems and trying to build these things out? What do you think is the necessary amount that needs to be like kind of used by the builders?
Well, I think ultimately these things all depend on the value of the native asset, and that's the money. And so that's what all the incentive structures are built on and everything. So for anything to get any distributed consensus network to get massively like globally adopted, it's going to probably become the world reserve currency or, the one money for the world. And so in that respect, I think you have to be very worried because all of the powerful, I mean, they go to war for much less and they will come after you. And it's OPSEC and all these other things. I mean, it has to be very, very decentralized.
All right. David says maximum paranoia equals maximum paralysis. Do you think that is Bitcoin paralyzed? I don't think I don't think that Bitcoin is paralyzed, and I don't think that Bitcoin's commute. The only purpose of L1 is to make the Bitcoins. The Bitcoins can be used in many ways other than that. Like it doesn't have to be on L1.
I mean, is that the main purpose? I think that's the main purpose of the Bitcoin network because that's the only thing the Bitcoin network can do.
That's the only thing that's scalable.
Are you sure about that?
I'm pretty sure.
I don't think we know that.
Well,
we don't know otherwise.
Yeah, just look at the evidence. Do you have? I have tons and tons of evidence to support that, but there's only hopes and dreams that there is something different that's scalable on layer one.
When we're talking scale, what are we talking about? Are we talking about like throughput of data?
Talking about, well, I mean, the biggest measure of scale is market cap, right? I mean,
okay.
That's what we're all here for.
Scale.
Yeah, that's what we're all here for.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. No, I don't really have any strong comments to make.
All right, Ansel, any last words?
Nope. Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on,
Nice to meet you
man.
for the first time, Ansel.
Yep. You too, David.
All right, David, who's next? Are we wrapping it up?
I really want Anti-Pro to come on, but he's
not gonna do it, dude.
He's a little scaredy cat. He texts in chat while I'm talking now.
Keyboard commando over here.
Yeah.
All right, let's stop referring to him if he's not going to come on. Are you going to invite anyone else on?
Let's see. David, you Trobin, you want to come on? Let me know and I'll send you the link. I know you're a listener. Okay.
I'm just trying to look through this. I completely disagree with this idea that you need to have a Turing complete layer to have a DEX. Like, have you heard of BISC? Like, I really think that people need to listen to the Urbit interview because I think that Bitcoin Sign Guy in the interview really breaks down, why you don't need necessarily like a blockchain application to have this decentralization that people seek. You just need to run your own server. If you are running your own applications on hardware that you control, and you're not just bulk licensing it out, then, like going to, a Facebook or something like that, but, you are going to an AWS and you are getting this server, or you are running a server on your property or whatever, like that gives you a lot of affordances.
Doesn't that
And
make it
this
trusted though?
BTC Pay server, Bitcoin nodes, all of these things are servers that you run, and they give you a massive amount of, a massive amount of privacy, a massive amount of control over your data, a massive amount of sovereignty. And none of them, other than the Bitcoin node, need any sort of like consensus, right? So I don't necessarily think it has to be like a decentralized exchange. You can have an exchange network, like again, a BISC, where everyone's running their own BISC node. It connects them together. They're communicating. They coordinate trades, and then boom, you have a trade that gone through. Again, like there's no way to take it down because you have to take down every single BISC node. So that's very decentralized. It doesn't need the Bitcoin network. It doesn't need to stay in consensus. It doesn't need all this extra baloney.
Yeah. So after we did our Urbit episode, I got reached out to by like multiple people. Kenny Rowe, this guy who I had never talked to before on Twitter, and said that the Christian, the guest, kind of just glossed over about how like most of Urbit or the Urbit like name ID system or something is all built on Ethereum, and that just never got mentioned. I wasn't smart enough to ask it. But like
the names are non-fungible tokens on Ethereum, but it could be non-fungible tokens on anything
that can host non-fungible tokens. The thing with Urbit is like, first off, I don't see how that solves the trust issue. And second, like, I don't see how that's, you can have these one-off applications. Like there's this Urbit server that does this one thing, and that can it connect to other Urbit servers? Can we have like the DeFi composability meme grow in Urbit? Like, can Uniswap talk to Compound? Like, can we do that on Urbit? I don't know if we can. That'd be pretty cool, but I don't know if we can do that. Like, it seems like Urbit's really, really early, and we don't really know what that's going to look like.
Well, I wasn't saying Urbit as like the example. I was saying more running your own personal servers, right? Whether that is enabled through Urbit or whether it's through legacy infrastructure, I don't know.
So how does that solve the trust issue?
Well, I mean, all these applications, right? They're looking like, how can we network, right? How can we network over Tor? How can we network over this kind of stuff? Like, I'm not saying that we can do a DEX. And again, like, I don't know exactly how BISC manages like the order book and brings it all together. I should do a little bit more research on that front. But generally speaking, like, you don't always need to be like on this consensus Turing complete layer to do a lot of the things that eventually you're going to want to do. And again, things like Lightning, things like other layer 2s that have interoperability, they're going to enable a lot of stuff that we can't even imagine right now.
Yeah.
Composability is cool. Like, I don't want to talk shit on it. Like the Eltzer pod that we did was super, super fucking interesting. Right. But at the end of the day, like, what needs to be super decentralized? Like, none of those things that he talks about need to be super decentralized. Right. And I mean, is that going to drive a bunch of value to Ether? I mean, they could be done on Tron. They can be done on a lot of things.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to the purpose of why we're talking about this, is because like, so the FOMO 3D team or the Pool Together team or like, none of these things need to be decentralized per se, but it's because of Ethereum, decentralization for these applications is free. And so like, what are they getting?
It's not free. It can't be free.
It's cost minimized.
There's a UX cost, right?
Yeah, but that's also a solvable problem. So like, what are we getting out of like building out Pool Together in a maximally decentralized way? Like, where it's like, or Uniswap just in a maximally decentralized way. Like, why is that so cool? And it's like, not the decentralization, but it's the permissionlessness and the unstoppableness and the composability. And so like, those three things all being in the same space is what's really, really powerful. And we've talked about this before, but then the Bitcoiners will come and say, well, I just don't know if you need to do this on L1, you can do this on Urbit, or you could do this on top of Lightning, and you can do this insert hypothetical statement here. Well, we haven't seen those things yet, and we have seen them be composable, be permissionless, be decentralized on Ethereum and being used. And so like it's not like Ethereum is just this beta that is testing these things out. Like it kind of is, but at some point that beta goes and slowly, without any sort of date, turns into the real thing. And for some people like Mariano Conti, it is the real thing. That's his financial system. But for people in America, it's just like a beta or an alpha that these things are being tried out. But like at some point, and you always use the line, I say something bullish about Ethereum, and then you say like, well, when that finally comes, where will Bitcoin be? Well, Ethereum is already doing these things. So by the time like Urbit comes around or like Lightning Network apps come around, where will Ethereum be? Like our DeFi we're laying bricks every single week. Like where do you think our DeFi composable ecosystem will be by the time that that's possible on top of Urbit?
With lots of KYC.
And the upside down, the non-KYC.
Maybe. Again, like I agree. Like there's kind of a head start, but I don't know. Like I'm trying to like look at the DeFi space and like look like, okay, so there's these bricks to trade these things, but what is there to trade other than ETH and then other versions of ETH? I mean, the synthetic stuff is interesting. Like there are positive, bricks being laid, but like I said with Anthony's interview or his little snippet is, there are impressive things happening and this network is growing, but at the same time, there is like Ansel kind of pointed out, there is a group of people in this world that are conspiring to murder a network, a decentralized organism, and create another one. And I definitely do not think that, I think that a lot of the Lindy and the headway that has been created, I don't know how that is going to necessarily smooth over into the next network. And on top of that, like, I don't know. Like, I just don't know how all this is going to come together. And I'm going to stop blabbering. I invited Colin. We'll see if he joins, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we should wrap this up soon.
Colin's a good person to end on because he's pretty in the middle. Like the whole murdering our old chain is just the wrong words to choose. Like Ethereum 1 is being folded into Ethereum 2 very respectfully, very nicely, and it's going to be forever usable on Ethereum 2, and all of the ether is getting moved over to Ethereum 2, and we're giving like this, 2-year long window of time to move over to Ethereum 2. Like we're not murdering it. We're rebuilding this new chain with a privileged door back to the old chain for the old chain to either stay there or to come on. Like we're not murdering it. Like all the Lindy of Uniswap and the Lindy of MakerDAO, like we didn't kill MakerDAO Lindy when we transitioned from SIDE to DAI. Like 90% of the contracts are still the same. Like most of these
How's
things,
the transition going?
Let me tell you. I'm going to go to sci2dai.xyz and inform you that, let's see, 23.4% has been migrated to DAI.
What is that, faster or slower than you anticipated?
I didn't really anticipate much. I think the big whales are kind of waiting. Let's see if I can just share my screen real quick. So like 3 or 4 CDPs manage like most of the DAI. Can everyone see that? I think so. Shout out to Dave Craig and these 2 individuals who I don't know. So like 5 CDPs represent like 90% of the DAI or something. Okay, I'm going to share screen. And so like it's going to really be up to those
Gotcha.
guys.
It sounds like Coinbase and others.
Yeah.
So so quick question about being decentralized. Are you concerned at all about like Coinbase and other large exchanges staking ETH?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And so that's part of the reason why decentralized exchanges are so important, is because we reduce our dependence on centralized exchanges. But at the same time, like it's not like their incentives are any different. Like if they have ETH, they are stakeholders all the same. I mean,
there's a lot of exchanges holding a lot of Bitcoin and they try to hard fork it. Like there's
Right.
no proof that holding it means you're going to magically do the right thing.
Well, what if by definition, whatever the thing that is done is the right thing? Like the right thing is your subjective opinion on what the right thing is.
Yeah, but the users of the network might not agree with what Coinbase and other exchanges decide to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's other issues like staking services like staked.us. Shout out Cole. I saw you in here earlier. Like these are important conversations for like staking as a service or generalized mining, which I hate as a term. I'm not terribly concerned. Simply because like every time we shout out like, oh, there's more ETH locked in DeFi, they're like, we passed 4% of ETH locked in DeFi. That's 4% that's off the table to maliciously attack the network. And so the more and more Ether in DeFi, especially in things like 0x or Uniswap, the more power that the computers have. The computers is the applications that have taken away from Coinbase or Gemini or whatever. And so like 4% is pretty good for DeFi being like 2 years old and really more just like 1 year old. And so like that, the bullish case for Ethereum is that like all of these computers suck up all the Ether and all these centralized services. Like I said, like crypto banks, crypto exchanges turn into decentralized services on top of Ethereum. So we don't need to have our funds inside of Coinbase or inside of insert your favorite exchange here.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know how that solves actually like converting fiat into that. I think that's a big area where DeFi doesn't necessarily offer like a role that can displace a Coinbase or another exchange. But the other is like the ease of use of custodying it there. Like maybe people don't want to custody it. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's been anything that has shown me that people actually want to custody their assets, at least normal people. Like there has to be a massive change in behavior. Like even my roommates don't custody their assets. Mm-hmm. So they're young whippersnappers, but they're using Square and Coinbase and all that stuff. They have ledgers and Trezors, and they have me. Yeah. And still, so I don't know.
That is one thing that does concern me the most, more than using my funds in Uniswap or using my funds in Compound or whatever. What does concern me is like using my ledger through MetaMask. Like I actually don't know the risk vectors there. I actually don't know what that's about. And like, if there was a way to buy insurance for just a total loss of funds because somebody was scanning my Wi-Fi or whatever, I don't know how this works. I would totally buy that. But like that's why Eric Connor is so bullish on smart contract wallets. And I've been meaning to move over more and more funds into my Argent wallet, but like you can set like a limit, right? So like if I lose my phone, I can set a limit to not send more than like 2 DAI per day or 2 Ether per day anywhere. And if it does, I can program it how I want. Like I can just lock it down and be like, okay, if somebody ever tries to make this transaction, they would only make this transaction because they don't know of the rules I've set. And so we're locking down the wallet. And so, got 48 hours, no transactions out of this wallet. And so then you can re-access the wallet through a different mechanism. And so like these smart contract wallets, I think are a good way to help people self-custody. What up, Colin? Welcome.
Yo, what's up, David? What's up, CK?
Hey, how's
Always
it going?
a pleasure to have you on.
So, Colin, you're going to be the last guest. This is going pretty long, but we were talking about minimal viable decentralization.
Oh, minimum viable decentralization. Okay. So wait, what was the point you were making right before I got on, David?
Talking about how smart contract wallets can help people custody their own funds and get them off of exchanges, and because Christian what brought up the issue is like, okay, like what happens when proof of stake arrives and then Coinbase and Gemini like have like 20% of all the Ether, like what's up with that? And so my answer was like, well, that's why all these like decentralized applications on Ethereum are so useful, because then you don't need to have your funds there.
Well, I guess theoretically also, like, just to play devil's advocate here as a Bitcoiner, CK. I mean, you could just have pooled stakes, right? You don't necessarily have to do it through Coinbase and stuff, right? Like you could like for instance, all the ETH dudes on Twitter, if they wanted to, they could just create their own smart contract to pull it together, right?
Yeah. But
you have to take into account that Coinbase is trying to compete to get you to leave your ETH there, right? And same with everyone else.
So all of these exchanges are.
Yeah, all of these exchanges.
This way you don't have to run a
They also
node.
have the incentive to suck up your ETH.
Yeah. You don't have to run a node. You don't have to like figure out how to manage your own funds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can just give Coinbase your funds and then let Coinbase stake for you, probably for a small fee or something. And then Coinbase has all of the ether and they're staking everything.
So, but wait, so if I wanted to stake my Ethereum when ETH 2.0 comes out, like, and I'm staking it in a pool with you, we would both have to run our own full nodes?
No, just one of us would.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense to me. Like, I mean, but so going back to your question though, or your hypothetical there, Christian, like Coinbase is going to try to incentivize, but what could they really incentivize outside of the realms of the network incentives, except I guess free Ethereum out of their own pockets? But like they wouldn't, I mean, like maybe they beef up the rewards, but then that would be coming out of their own pool of funds. You know what I'm saying? Like, so like that's not really.
Colin, your internet's pretty shitty. Can you, or is it my? Oh no, that's my internet. Sorry. Nope, you're fine.
But like that wouldn't really necessarily be sustainable, would it? Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, you couldn't really keep those rewards going for so long.
You're assuming that there are non-custodial options that actually compete with Coinbase. I'm just saying
there
that
could be. I'm saying that there could be.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I'm just saying that obviously these organizations are in position to make it really, really easy and comfortable for you to leave their funds there, and they are a risk to the network.
Fair point.
Yeah. I think the big question is like, why would Coinbase or Gemini's incentives be aligned differently than the rest of the network? And so like maybe we can have a hypothetical, like what if they do have misaligned incentives? But I think we also have to ask questions like, why would they?
Why would they?
We already saw this with Bitcoin.
Like what? What happened?
SegWit 2x.
Why did the exchanges want 2x?
This fork is Bitcoin. We're going to support this fork at this time. We all agree this is the person that's developing it. This is what we're going to list as Bitcoin up until a week before.
Yeah, but that's not an attack, right? That's just two subjective opinions.
And that it matters way more when they have a bunch of stake and are staking, right?
Yeah, but it's not an attack.
I mean, a lot of times I would argue that it very much is an attack. And I would think that if you do not agree with a fork decision that an exchange is making, that you would also consider an attack. But this is not about what I think. It's about what Colin thinks. SegWit 2x was SegWit 2x an attack, Colin?
Yeah, Colin and your dick. What's up? I think you might have missed it.
He's not even listening.
Sorry, my girlfriend came upstairs. What was that?
Was SegWit 2x an attack?
Yeah, totally. It was absolutely an attack.
How do you determine this?
You determine an attack because it was a group of companies and exchanges and developers outside of the working outside of the usual social consensus to try to push upgrades that no one else on the network wanted. And not only did no one else on the network not want, but no one else on the network even had a say into what those upgrades were. So it's not like they were going through GitHub, right, to give pull requests or to release code that would be released or that would be peer reviewed and would then be, rolled out.
Wasn't there some like terrible inflation bug in SegWit 2x or something?
Yeah, like I mean, there was like definitely there were bugs that would have, some say would have killed Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I actually don't think that this actually is as relevant to proof of stake as you think it is, Christian, because like
I would agree.
They in proof of stake say 2x happens, it's an own version on Ethereum, and then exchanges and whatever all stake for one side and everyone else doesn't want that. Well, then there'll be a chain split. But if really there is consensus to not go with the Coinbase Gemini staking chain and do the other chain, then everyone's going to stick with the old chain. So just because the exchanges are staking doesn't mean that they actually get to pick the social consensus of which chain to choose.
Colin?
I mean, yeah, I think I agree with that. Like, from what it seems like to me, it's like the whole staking thing is like pretty, at least from what I understand, is like going to work the same for everybody. And it's not like the exchanges are trying to push a different way of staking that's incompatible with the rest of the chain. And if like David was saying, if they were to do that, then it would just fork and then people would choose which one they want, which is kind of like 2x, I guess, but that doesn't really seem to be the situation here. Like I like the danger of a fork doesn't really seem to be presented, at least from what I can tell.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because
so,
in this model, like miners are like how Bitcoiners say miners are just slaves to the nodes. Stakers are just slaves to the nodes. And it's the nodes that define.
I mean, that's
consensus.
definitely not true but here, quick question. Does a exchange supporting an upgrade matter? Does it actually matter?
What do you mean? Like what kind of upgrade?
Like, does it matter for SegWit? Does it matter for Psi to die? Does it matter for a new ETH hard fork? Does an exchange supporting it matter?
It depends on which exchange it is. If it represents the majority of liquidity for that asset, then one would say it does matter.
Well, wouldn't their hand just be forced ultimately in the end?
Because of users?
Yeah, right.
I mean, yeah, potentially.
I mean, what happens to DAI if they don't support the new DAI? If they just stay on Psi? If Kraken, if Coinbase, they don't support DAI.
See, now this is why DeFi is so fucking dope, is because like DAI matters much more for DeFi than it does for CeFi. And so like DAI is going to get adopted inside of Uniswap and inside of Oasis like much faster and like instantaneously. And so like waiting for Coinbase to upgrade or maybe not upgrade to new DAI is somewhat irrelevant.
Right. And I guess it doesn't even matter if they do decide to upgrade, because the people using and the people creating CDPs, like they don't really care necessarily about going on Coinbase. Like you said, they're just going to go on to Compound or something else.
Right. It's
So
the
that's if
upside
they
down.
don't want dollars.
The upside down.
Okay. So you say that exchanges supporting large financial nodes supporting your chain or your code change is irrelevant, has minimal impact. Do you actually believe that?
Are you asking me or Colin?
Either of you. It seems like both of you think that.
I mean, I think the only reason why I think it would be dangerous is just because this is where I will throw in, I think, a legit criticism, is I think that it's very difficult for an average user to run a full node on Ethereum. So I think that that's probably where some of the challenges come in, because it doesn't matter whether or not an exchange is supporting it if you can still run the code that you agree with, right? Or that you see as being the real code. But if all of the nodes are being run by centralized entities, then that's where it would become a problem in my mind.
Yeah, I'm not terribly concerned about that issue because we're aware that it's an issue and are actively fixing it. But if that does continue to become an issue, then sure.
Well, how are nodes going to work on ETH 2.0? Like,
it's a lot lighter.
Okay, but like
they also don't validate the whole chain.
Yeah, see,
well, beacon chain nodes do.
But how is a beacon chain node going to be like a huge ass like?
No.
Like Eric Wall did this thing where it took him like 2 months to stake an Ethereum full node.
Yeah, right.
Would that take me like? Would a beacon chain take me like a month? Like how long would that take?
We need to get Trent on here. Trent, are you in the chat? No. I'm not the person to ask about nodes.
Okay.
But we have the same goals of Bitcoin, where we want everyone to be able to run their own node. And so this is a design goal of Ethereum 2.0 for this to be very lightweight and easy. Like we've been talking about like some of the earliest questions. Like I remember Carl Florsch, a plasma researcher, talking about this with Vitalik and David Knott and some other developers, like where they were talking about like, okay, what choices do we want to make for users when it comes to running a node? Like, do we want to have an i5 processor or an i7 processor? Do we want it to be able to be run on consumer grade laptop or a consumer desktop computer? Like, these are the kinds of questions that they are being asked, but it's always consumer grade applications that you can buy right off the store. And so when Ethereum 2 is being developed, it's being developed with like, okay, do we want it to be able to be run by a $200 processor or a $100 processor, or, you know, a $250 SSD or a $150 SSD? Like, these are the questions, not do we want a fucking EOS node to run our beacon chain versus a consumer grade laptop? Like it's all consumer hardware.
It's all about those nodes though, man. Sovereignty in a box, baby. Let's go.
It's about running your server, right? Again, I do think it's interesting that you say like we want the same thing, but I think it's very different than creating the same effect, right? Bitcoin is all about like really, really minimizing the bandwidth it takes to download the node, being able to run it on as cheap as hardware as possible. And if hardware gets better, then you can get nodes on your phone. You know, you don't necessarily have to have nodes on your computer, or it has to be a solid state. Like, hardware is going to keep getting better, and that's just going to make it easier and easier for everyone to have their own copy. And I see some people in here in the chat talking about, hey, you know, it took Eric Wall a month to download an archival node. We had Anthony on here, who was used to be with the ETH Classic Cooperative, and he explained that the actual criticism is not necessarily keeping all the states and the state history. It's about trustlessly validating from the beginning, right? Are you trusting who you got the information from in terms of, you know, which node you're syncing it from, or did you actually validate it from the beginning? It's not necessarily about keeping all of the states and maintaining a full archival node.
That's really interesting part of that.
Again, I'm personally very interested to see, like, okay, so ETH2 is designing this perfect system that can be run on all this consumer hardware, but at the same time, you know, Bitcoin has more and more nodes every single day. Like, what actually matters for this network is creating this unstoppable monetary unit, this unstoppable monetary system that is to the nth degree decentralized, right? All the way out to the fringes. Like, you could not kill the ledger state if you tried, right? It would take literally knocking out all the power on earth to do it, and then building a financial system on top of that unit. That's what Bitcoin is about. That's what maximum decentralization is about. And everything else, depending on the use case, depending on how censorship resistant it needs to be, will have a range of viable decentralization, in my opinion.
So going from like 5,000 nodes to 10,000 nodes is not nearly as important as going from like 1,000 nodes to 2,000 nodes. Like, at some point, we don't need that many nodes. And like, sure, more is better, but like, it's a drop in the bucket at some point in time.
I would disagree though, in the sense that, like, if we go back to like SegWit2x as an example, the more people running the software means that if something like 2x were to happen again, the more democratic the vote to choose the next chain is, right? And like, for each user, like for the average user who's not running a node, they actually, if they're not running a node, they don't have a say on whether or not they want 2x or the legacy chain, right?
But that's not where their say comes in. Their say comes in with what token that they buy and what token that they don't, and what token that they sell. If everyone sells the 2x, it doesn't matter what the nodes do.
My point being, what it does matter though, because if you had enough people running, like, let's say that you had the attackers trying to push something like 2x, if they somehow created or maintained enough infrastructure to represent 50% of the nodes on the network, then they could effectively split the value of the coin. But the more people you have running nodes to push back against that 50% consensus from the people who are attacking the main chain, you know, the less valuable that other coin becomes, right?
Can't you just sock puppet a bunch of nodes though? Can't you just, how much does it cost to spin up like 1,000 nodes on AWS?
Well, that's what I'm saying is these attackers could do exactly that. And they could give the false impression that more nodes want this coin than actually do, and give the false impression that there's market demand for something.
Right. So it's market demand. Right. It's market demand, not number of nodes.
Yeah, but it gives faulty numbers, right? So I do agree with you. Like there are market principles that would actually drive the adoption or demand for certain currency. But if you're looking at statistics that say 50% of the nodes in the network are signaling for this hard fork, then you might have the idea that this is the hard fork, or even if it's 60%, and it's really just 20 companies.
So I would jump in here too. I would actually say that having more nodes actually it solidifies not being able to upgrade, right? Not being able to coordinate a change, right? So if you have 5,000 nodes, you could potentially coordinate all 5,000 of those people. But I think I think Ansel actually correctly described that as an attack. Like you are attacking the rule set, right? So having infinitely more nodes just makes that impossible. And some people would consider that to be calcification, but we want to calcify the rules of the game, in my opinion. And maybe that is really the crux of the argument, right? Is at one point, do you want to calcify the rules? And I'm sure that there's going to be people in the ETH community that want to calcify the rules at some point, and maybe the exchanges don't agree with that. Maybe other people don't agree with that. But as long as the strategy is to coordinate and then change the rules, there's always going to be a level of subjectivity that I think makes for bad money, personally.
Also, sorry, I want to cut in. I'm going to go because my girlfriend's parents are still here visiting for Thanksgiving. I don't want to be rude, but still wanted to kind of jump in on this because this is pretty fun. I like the concept. To anyone who's watching right now, follow CK Snarks, follow Trustless State, follow POV Crypto, best balanced cryptocurrency podcast in the game. Anyway, yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks, Colin.
Peace.
Pieces.
And on that, I think we should wrap up.
Shall we? Unless Auntie finally wants to come on.
No, he's not. He's
he
too busy.
Just wants he wants to just troll and chat like he always does. Okay,
right,
everyone, thanks for coming and joining us for our 100th episode. Glad we finally got live streaming up and out. I think Christian and I kind of tentatively agreed that we're going to do this every Friday or every Sunday at the same time. So mark it on your calendars. Sundays at 5 p.m. PST.
Yeah, not 100% yet, but hopefully we can keep up that calendar. We're going to try to be doing more fight nights and be more selective with the interviews for all the shows beyond show 100. Thanks for sticking around, guys. Make sure to follow the show at POV Crypto Pod. Make sure to follow both of us. And, you can still donate to the links. Like those addresses don't expire, even though the fundraiser has expired.
Yeah, the fundraiser expires right now. I'm gonna go shave right now. It's gonna be great. I'll post the before after photo. I'm looking very much forward to it.
Peace.
Thanks, everyone. All right, I just stopped it.
That was long. All right,
dude, you got smoked.
You
got smoked in our competition.
Dude,
well,
fuck. Was it? It was close until our yesterday.
Right? Hold on, I'm gonna take you off of headphones so you can talk to Hunter.
Hi, Christian.
Yeah, what's up, dude?
No,
can't hear you.
There we go. Okay, so we had a competition where whoever's going to donate more Bitcoin would go to Christian's side, and whoever's going to donate more Ether or DAI goes to my side. And this is for Movember. It was like neck and neck. It was like roughly $300 each going into this, and I just checked it, and somebody donated 5 Ether. And so there's like the idea was that whoever lost has to match the difference and then donate it to instead of Movember, donate it to some crypto thing. And so Christian got fucking smoked.
Christian, you're a bitch.
Yeah.
It was great up until the end, but apparently David is the one who knows. Wait, also, I think we're still streaming.
No, we're not.
You end the stream?
Oh, yes, we are.